We're officially 3 years into the Helmet Collection sub-theme, and this year, finally, we've gotten some non-original trilogy sets. This wave has 3 helmets, 2 of which are from The Mandalorian, and the other from the original trilogy. And today I'm going to review all 3 of them in one go. And I'm also going to give them a ranking compared to each other and the previous helmets. Starting with the unboxing, we immediately see something pretty strange. The box arts are, as expected, exactly the same as each other. This includes the same 2 pages of preamble that's been formatted the same since this sub-theme began. What's interesting here is that while Luke's helmet's instructions are printed on the newer kind of darkish grey background, both the Mandalorian helmet and the Dark Trooper helmet are both printed on the regular kind of light bluish background. I'm not sure if this is an oversight or if it's intentional for whatever reason, but the discrepancy is still really weird. Moving on and looking at the build experience of Luke's helmet, the stand that it's built on is built the exact same way as any other helmet set, but because this helmet doesn't start at the chin, it kind of starts in the brain, if that makes sense. You kind of have to extend it up a bit. The visor build was much simpler than I thought. It's connected only using 2 ball joints. That red band that wraps around the center of the helmet was definitely the highlight of the build for me. It has reasonably complex sub-assemblies that attach in various different ways. None of them are exactly the same as each other. They end up overlapping each other to create an almost perfectly circular arch, which is great. I can only imagine the amount of effort it would take to create that shape. The yellow bands on each side of this red strip are attached at the back of the head via 2 clips. Then on the other end of these long, flexible yellow rods, you have another sub-assembly that contains the 2 large arches over the visor. The sub-assembly attaches to 4 studs on top of the forehead area and are very loosely connected, but this is made a lot more secure when you attach the last sub-assembly of that arched red section at the top. Each side of the helmet has a fairly standard build, but I did really enjoy the build for the ear cups on the inside. For the Dark Trooper helmet, you actually start building around the eyes, which is pretty interesting. You kind of build this band that goes around the eye level, which is pretty fun to put together, and it was a nice change from the usual starting point of the base or stand. Speaking of the base and stand, it was a completely conventional build up until you get to the top of the neck. There's this nice ring around the base of the neck, which was pretty satisfying to put together, but then you build the top of the neck in a very interesting way. It's built on this layered hinge system that means the neck can actually look up and down to a small degree. The head is attached to this tilting mechanism using standard studs on studs, which is way stronger than you would think it is. Building the temple sections on each side of the head was done fairly late on, and they were pretty simple sub-assemblies attached with 2 hinge sections. One really cool section I thought was the way that they built the jaws here. They're both attached using a ball joint connection, and usually you'd expect that you have to just kind of wing it or feel out the angle, but earlier on in the build you specifically used this piece with the end sticking out. This piece sticks into the ridge of the jaw sub-assembly and does a really good job at securing it at just the right angle. I love this because it's such a small detail that saves you a lot of potential frustration. But easily the highlight of this set was the nose and mouth sub-assembly. It's a huge, dense sub-assembly that ends up attaching to a single 1x2 clip. It was really fun to put together, and overall I'd be tempted to even say that this was the best Helmet Collection build experience I've ever had. Moving on to the Mandalorian helmet, in contrast to the Dark Trooper helmet especially, this is an extremely conventional helmet build. If you've built Boba Fett, the Stormtrooper, or the TIE Fighter helmet, it'll feel extremely familiar to you. The most interesting technique used here is when you attach the ear sections on each side of the head. They're pretty dense sub-assemblies and only attach via 2 ball joints, each right beside each other. But what makes it interesting is the use of the angled plate on the sub-assembly. It sticks into a cavity on the frame and basically means that the sub-assembly can't fit in fully, which gives the entire thing the extremely subtle angle that pinches towards the top. It's a really neat technique that really captures the Mandalorian helmet shape brilliantly. The cheeks on each side are much thicker sub-assemblies than the cheeks on the Boba Fett helmet, for example, which is great because that was one of my biggest complaints about the build experience for Boba Fett's helmet. There's 6 of these arched plate pieces that are offset slightly on each other to really nail that shape. Much better and much more interesting solution than the single plate used on Boba Fett's helmet. Overall, not much else to say about the build experience for this helmet. It's pretty fun, but nothing else crazily new. Looking at the sticker usage, there is barely any stickers used on these sets at all. Luke's helmet uses 9 stickers total, the Dark Trooper helmet uses 7, and the Mandalorian helmet doesn't have any stickers at all. In terms of how these stickers are used, looking at Luke's helmet first, 4 of these stickers are used for the smooth arched bricks on each side. I biffed the lineup on them, so my recommendation is to wait until you've assembled the base and put them on at the end to just make sure that you line them up properly. These 2x2 circular tiles probably should have been printed because it's very easy to misalign the direction of the sticker, which would be really annoying. Especially because that disc piece under it doesn't rotate, it's kind of in a set position. And I think it's pretty important to get that continuity of those stripes. The entire red arched section on the top uses printed pieces which are not printed with enough opacity. This colour should be the same solid white as the rest of the helmet, but ends up being a very slightly pinkish off-white. As much of a pain as it would have been to apply a sticker to all of these pieces, I would have much rather do that just to make sure that the colour is consistent across the whole thing. Other than that, you have a few stickers used for the diagonal line section just on the top of the forehead, and both the Rebel insignias are printed. The Dark Trooper helmet, as I said, only uses 7 stickers for the entire set, and of them, 5 of them are used for just the mouth section to get that vented look. It's hard not to draw comparisons to the Darth Vader helmet, which really butchered this section in terms of the venting, but I think they did a really good job on the Dark Trooper helmet here, and they applied just as many stickers as needed. And then the last 2 stickers were just used on the jaws to give it those vents, which is a detail they definitely needed to include, but I'd say almost definitely couldn't have done with bricks. And as I said, the Mandalorian helmet doesn't have any stickers, which is perfect. Looking at the design of each of these sets, starting with Luke's helmet, I like how the stand is properly connected to the helmet at the top, unlike the Batman cowl set where it just kind of sits in place. It makes it much easier to just move it around and there's no chance of you accidentally knocking it over. The set is insanely detailed. I especially think they nailed the band and the Rebel insignia. I think the visor looks okay. It's definitely not something I could see them doing any other way unless they specifically molded a huge visor piece for just this helmet. And doing that would just be cheating, so I have no real complaints here despite its inaccuracies. It's a prime example of limitation of the medium. My main criticism of the design of the set is that I don't know why they made the ear cups dark bluish grey. In every reference image I could find, they are very clearly orange. I think the bright yellow colour would have been perfect for these. Looking at the Dark Trooper helmet, this is way better looking in person than it is in pictures. I also think that it got way more flack than it deserves. The Dark Trooper has a fairly squished head in the show, so it's accurate to not have it exactly humanly proportioned. When the pictures for this set were announced, I saw a lot of people complaining and just stretching it so that it looked more human-like. But this is how it's supposed to look, and I think it looks great. In fact, I think this model is pretty much flawless in its design. However, there is a terrifying implication with the set. It's a helmet collection set. Calling these helmets implies the existence of a person underneath wearing these, which means Luke force-crushed a person to death in these scenes. Horrifying. But, ignoring that, this does open up the possibilities to get droid heads as helmet sets in the future, so something like a B-1 battle droid, tactical droid, General Grievous, or C-3PO could definitely be on the table now. Moving on, and when looking at Din's helmet, I think the best thing to do is to look at Boba Fett's helmet from the first wave. It's noticeably beefier than Boba's helmet, which is great, because my main complaint with Boba's helmet was that it was really thin, especially around the cheeks. Din's helmet here is noticeably better looking, with way more depth all around. They also managed to have the helmet flare out a bit at the bottom, as I mentioned earlier, which is something they never managed to do with Boba. It's basically a Boba Fett's helmet 2.0, and it's just better in every way, to a point that it's almost tempting to rebuild Boba's helmet as a recolored version of this set. I find myself liking this helmet more and more as time goes on. I actually don't think it's too crazy to say that it's the best looking helmet they've ever made. I actually really love it. Now moving on to value, all 3 sets cost €60, which is the standard price for helmet collection sets, with the only exceptions being Vader and the Scout Trooper. If you could only get one, I think Din's helmet is the obvious choice here, especially if you're a fan of the Mandalorian. None of these feel like bad value to me, but Luke's helmet does have a lot of empty space to look at, which does make it feel like worse value despite having 91 more pieces than Din's helmet and only 18 less than the Dark Trooper. You can argue that all helmet sets are a little overpriced because of the adult market premium cost, but if you've been able to stomach the prices for the last 2 years, then these are perfectly fine. And now moving on to the rankings. These helmet collection sets are extremely similar, so when it comes to ranking them, it all comes down to tiny differences in preference. With that in mind, I think Luke's helmet comes in at 6th out of the 8 helmet sets I have, above only the Scout Trooper helmet and Boba Fett's helmet. I put the Dark Trooper helmet one place above that at 5th out of 8 sets, just below Darth Vader's helmet. And I actually ranked Din's helmet at 1st out of 8 sets. The build was unremarkable, yeah, but it very quickly has become one of my favourite sets just to look at and to own. And for that reason, I think it's the best helmet they've made so far. In general, I find when you look at my Star Wars set rankings that the helmet collection always kind of stick together in a clump. And for the most part, they do the same here, with Din's helmet coming in at 14th, while the Dark Trooper sits at 19th, and Luke's helmet sits at 20th out of the 66 sets I own. The only difference here being that I like Din's helmet so much that I place it above the Imperial Probe Droid buildable character, which is the first time a helmet has broken away from the pack in my rankings since the sub-theme began. Looking at the rankings relative to my entire collection, Din is way separated from the pack now, ranking in at 28th out of 148 sets, below the Mandalorian Starfighter and above the McLaren Elva sets. The Dark Trooper and Luke's helmet remains sandwiched between the Darth Vader's helmet and Scout Trooper helmet, with rankings of 43rd and 44th out of 148 sets, respectively. And that was my review of the helmet collection sets for 2022. Hopefully we'll get some prequel era sets next time. Like, my god, they have to at some point. But yeah, thanks for watching. Farewell.